Well, hello. Really a pleasure to be here this morning with Alex Krebs on the West Coast of the United States. Thank you for being here, Alex, for the Tango Wisdom Virtual Summit discussions on community.
No, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So, if you would, just to kind of give us an idea of where you are and significant places that are culturally important to you. I know you're in Portland, Oregon currently.
Hmm.
Did you grow up in Portland or anywhere else?
I was born and raised in the Bay Area in California, then went to school in the Sierra Nevadas and wanted to stay on the West Coast to go to college. So I ended up taking a look at a bunch, including Reed College here in Portland, and that's where I ended up. Studied physics and music, and got into tango dancing while I was still at Reed in the '90s, and ended up starting teaching and integrating into the small existing community back then.
Great. And anywhere else in the world that's culturally significant to you, just so that we have an idea of kind of where your perspective is coming from.
Yeah, so I mean, many trips to Argentina, of course, to Buenos Aires. I think 9 trips in total. Lived there for about a year total. I've traveled a lot in Europe to teach and dance as well, and all over the U.S. So my perspective is as a tango dancer, teacher, organizer, and in those places.
Excellent. So you started in college, starting dancing tango in college. Could you tell us a little bit about your progression to where you are today as an organizer, a studio owner, and a musician, please?
Yeah, I didn't initially set out to be a tango dancer or organizer or a community leader or studio owner. It just kind of happened to me. I studied Spanish through junior high and high school and college, and physics and music, and then got interested into tango. And I think it's the best background to have, one of the best backgrounds to have as a tango dancer and teacher. So I fell in love with the music, fell in love with the dance. After I went to Buenos Aires, people asked if I taught, and that's when I first considered even teaching. I didn't set out to become a tango teacher. It just sort of happened to me. And then I started a practica, an informal gathering where I was just showing people what I had learned in Buenos Aires on my first trip. And eventually, pretty much everyone in the community was showing up. There were 50 people every week, a class and a practica, and it was a vibe of really sharing. And I've always done teaching thing. I taught snowboarding and I tutored in math for high school and stuff. So the teaching part of it, there's something, I don't know, that's just kind of in me that likes to do that. And it's, I think, okay at doing that. So as the practicum class was coming along, I went back to Buenos Aires to learn more how to teach better, get different teaching ideas, and graduated from Reed College and sort of set up to do tango for about a year before going to grad school, and started a dance, a milonga, and group classes and private lessons. And now that 1 year off from school has become 18 years off, and just keeps growing. But again, I think I set out to just share the information that I had learned. I didn't set out to turn it into a profession necessarily. That just kind of happened along the way.
And then your music background, I imagine, took you into the music realm of tango.
Yeah, so I have a degree in theory and composition, and played violin and saxophone growing up, and got my hands on a bandoneon, the tango instrument, in 2001. Started a little group, and then got more into it, and then since then have released 6 albums and played all over at festivals with the group, and I've integrated some of that into my teaching as well, teaching musicality for tango dancers, trying to dissect a little bit what it is in the music that we're listening to, and trying to share that to the dancers in a way that dancers can understand, not trying to get too technically musical with them, but trying to get more into the music, because I think when you understand the music better and you get into it, you fall in love with it, and it becomes easier um, to be a part of the music than if it's just something that's more background.
So it sounds like you came to be where you are today by organic means.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there were skills that you developed along the way. I'd love to hear about those skills that you developed along the way, as well as like what you see it takes to build a community, to allow it to grow.
Yeah. Well, early on I mean, when I joined the community here in Portland, Oregon, there was already a small community. Maybe, let's say, 12 to 15 people would show up once a week or once every other week at a milonga. And there was one teacher in town, Clay Nelson, who, when I started teaching and another teacher in town started teaching, he really embraced us and welcomed us and offered that we could teach at his studio. And there wasn't a sense like we were vicious competition out to steal all his students. And that, I think, really instilled in this other teacher and I that initial sense of, oh, this is how things are done. And I think had he seen us as vicious competition and not embraced us, the community today would be a lot different than it really is, because what he instilled in us, we, I think, in turn instilled that in the next generation of teachers and organized, which they then instilled in the next, and it kind of grew out of that. You know, I have huge respect for Clay Nelson as a community leader, as a business person, as a tango dancer, as an organizer, and not just Clay. There are others, many others involved in that initial stage. But myself personally, I think I just really like people, and I like connecting with people. And I think that in retrospect, I think why Portland continues to be a thriving community is because interpersonal relationships are culminated here, in little ways and big ways, you know. Practical things from greeting people sincerely at a milonga or a class or a practica, taking an interest in them, saying more than just hello or do you want to dance, is hearing their stories, getting to know people one person at a time. I have this belief now that you grow a community really one person at a time. It's not like you cast a wide net and you just form a community. You know, you get to know one person and their story, they come to the milonga, you follow up, then there's one more person, and then there's one more person. And it takes a while, but over the years, you have a large group of people that all know each other more than just surface. And I think people like that. That's what they see as a community. I sometimes relate it to, you know, if you have your favorite restaurant where the owner comes out and greets you and knows what your favorite dish is, you're going to go back to that restaurant, whether it's the best restaurant in town or not. But that restaurant is creating an interpersonal relationship that's meaningful beyond just serving you the food, you paying and leaving. I think as social beings, we like that. We like that connection, not necessarily just when you're dancing, but when you're not dancing. Do people talk to you? Do people greet you? Is it a welcoming space, you know? Or are people just there to go and get their dance fix and then leave? I think what happens off the dance floor is almost more important to building a community than when people are actually dancing. You know, of course, circulating and trying to get as many people to dance as possible and making them feel welcome is important. But for me, sometimes if I go to milonga and I have great social interactions and maybe I don't dance at all, I still have a good evening because I feel like I'm not invisible. You know, I feel like someone is there who cares about me, who wants to connect with me. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. In preparing for this, I came across Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I guess is a certain thing for building community, we as social creatures have these specific needs, which are, I think the first one is the physiological needs. We need, shelter and food. And so if you say, okay, that's the first basic need, then if you're hosting a milonga or a festival, you make sure that there are snacks and food. And maybe at a festival, you make sure there's time for people to take breaks and naps and sleep. So you cover sort of those basic needs. And the second is safety, that after fulfilling our physiological needs, we need our safety needs met. So creating a safe space. And on the surface, safe could mean, not getting hurt, but it's also creating, for example, a safe space for women, being proactive and teaching men how do you make a space safe for women, both socially and physically, so that they feel more comfortable in that space, specifically classes and milongas. How do you encourage people in a class, both as a student, as a teacher, and not go over and create a space where they feel like if they fail at a step or something, then they will be judged, in a way that's relates to the safety. When people feel safe and comfortable, they're going to learn better. They're going to want to be in that space more. After safety, I think it's, self-esteem or something or belonging is the next, So again, these interpersonal relationships, saying hello, caring about a student, caring about a dancer that maybe is someone technically that's not skilled. Maybe they're not a very good dancer, but you can still create an interpersonal relationship with them and not feel obliged to dance with them then or all night or whatever. Self-esteem, I think, comes next. And that is, I think, important for DJs and organizers, for DJs to play music that's easy to dance to, that's danceable, so that dancers don't feel like they're failing at being able to be musical or dance well. There's certain music that I say sort of dances itself. It just makes you move, makes you want to dance, and it's danceable. And there's other tango music, which is a lot more obtuse and intellectual. That can be fun to dance to, but it's also difficult. And for people that are already struggling with their self-esteem or are still learning, hard music to dance to doesn't really fulfill that basic need of self-esteem. It works kind of against that. I think also like teachers encouraging students, teachers teaching things that are practical, easy, and useful. I think, for teachers to remember that this is a popular dance. Some people treat it as a high art, more like ballet. Other people treat it more like a very recreational thing. Sometimes they do every once in a while. But its roots are in a popular dance form, not as a high art form. And some people will strive to do that. I treat it as such, but I can't expect everyone to treat it like I treat it. And so I have to recognize that as a teacher, first thing is to take someone who doesn't dance and make them feel like they're competent through doing things that are basic and easy and doable first. And then if they want to go on to do fancier, more complicated things, that's fine too. But to make things accessible, I think, is important for that self-esteem. And when all those things are met in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then you have the self-realization, which is kind of, okay, I guess the equivalent of like you're now self-confident in your dancing and yourself, and you feel like you've integrated into a community. So I think using that hierarchy of needs as sort of an outline or platform, what can we do as teachers and organizers to build community, that at least gives us a starting point, is to ask what are people's needs and how do we fulfill them in a way that's consistent with our own needs as organizers or teachers or dancers. That's kind of, I think, the big picture going on, and then there's smaller specific things of how to actually implement that.
Excellent. I love that. And it sounds like, you fed a need of the community, and that's how you came to offer what it is that you do.
Uh-huh.
And that sounds like a perfect way to enter into something instead of a forced, and it allows to be organic and occur that way.
Yeah.
So you spoke a little bit of how to foster the sort of welcoming and bringing people in. Not every community is like that. And as you've traveled around and seen different things, what are some of the things that you've observed as being the most detrimental to communities?
Well, for example, I was in Europe this summer and I was dancing in a city, and it was listed on the website, and I went. It was an sort of unmarked door with a doorbell that barely you could see the number. There was no sign. So I finally figured it out, and you rang the bell and the door opened, and then you had to enter through this dark courtyard and sort of find your way. So already, as someone who had never been there or danced, it was already daunting. Am I in the right place? Am I following protocol? I don't know. There's no sign. There's no indication that I'm even headed towards a milonga. I'm just in some dark courtyard. Am I going to trip on the cobblestones? So then I hear the music and I find it, and there's someone taking the money, and I go up and I say hello, and they say hi, €10. So I pay my €10, thank you, and that's it. There's no I haven't seen you before, or the coat rack is over there. So the person taking the money wasn't really greeting. It was their job to take the money. And as someone newer there, in a way, you have to, if someone is new to a space, you have to teach them how to use the space or what to do. It's the same when we throw a house party, when we have guests, they come in, we say, feel free to take off your shoes. Coats go here. Would you like a drink? You teach them how to use the space. If you just don't answer the door and they walk in, they don't really know the protocol, and already they feel less comfortable in that space. So already that need of safety or comfort in a space is not fulfilled. Now, fortunately, I'm self-confident enough that I feel like I can wander and sit. And so in this milonga, I found a place to sit, and I sat and I watched, and I'm happy to do that. No one came over and was curious. I tried to cabeceo, no one cabeceo, which is fine. But it was really, there was no effort by the dancers, the organizers, the DJ, anyone to even acknowledge that I was there. Not that I needed to dance necessarily, but as somehow someone to welcome someone that's new. And it wasn't a milonga where there were 500 people, maybe there were 20 people or so, so it was obvious that I was there. But at the same way, I felt kind of invisible, and like I would never go back there. There are other choices. I don't live there, but if I had any other choice that night, I would never go back there, because I don't think they're trying to be unwelcoming, but there was no effort, I felt like, to be welcoming. And then in another city I went with my wife, and we went out and we were sitting, and I danced with my wife and tried to cabeceo, didn't get a cabeceo, which is fine. Maybe something's wrong with my cabeceo, I don't know. But someone came over eventually and sort of just sat down. It was just a dancer, and they said, haven't seen you before. And just that act of coming over, whether we danced or not, was like a small, super small effort and I would go back to that milonga. I don't really remember if the music was good or not, or if the dancing was good or not, but I remember that gesture, that social gesture of creating, a welcoming space. So what's detrimental? I think, I could say money and ego are detrimental, but I don't think really anyone starts a milonga to make money. I think that's the worst way to try to make money. Go into real estate or something, don't start a milonga. I also think teaching tango, is if you're in it to make money, it's really not, you know, if you want money, like any other profession, I think would be better than teaching tango. So I think the people that teach and organize on some level, they really do it for the love of it because the money is not an issue. However, if someone schedules a milonga on the same day as someone else, um, you know, money is involved or ego is involved. Why did they do that? And so, communicating and being mindful not to schedule classes and dances on top of other people if you can. I mean, in larger communities, it's impossible to do that because you might already have multiple milongas on one night. If you start another milonga, I think it's fine. At that point, I think just, filtering the noise is part of it and thinking about the long game. I think a lot of my success is, I stay pretty consistent with what I do. Some people might like it, some people might not, but I have my way that I like to do things. And I don't, if someone says you should have your classes on some other night, for me, in terms of consistency and community building, people know I teach on Tuesday nights, 50 weeks out of the 52 weeks in the year. And I take the last 2 weeks off. So if you want to study with me, you know that on Tuesday nights, there's always an option. And it's been like that for years. And I think that consistency makes it easier for people than trying to change dates and times and things like that. What else? Detrimental to a community. I think people that claim that this is the way that tango should be done and that are very zealous about tango being one thing, whether it's how a milonga should be run or what music should be played or how tango should be danced. Tango is a very dynamic art form. It changes, it grows. Even since I've danced, it's gone through different phases and trends. And I think that's good. It needs to grow in order to survive. So I think being welcoming to and encouraging to new ideas, to people that have energy to organize and do things around tango, to not say, no, you can't do that because of this or this rule. There are really no rules here. And so as more veteran community members, if they could be more open to newer generations and less territorial, I guess, around tango, I think tango would grow more, around that. Yeah, I think those are the main the main things that are to the detriment of a community.
And you speak of kind of laying the groundwork and the foundation of welcoming and gestures of people coming over. Do you in your community assign roles to people, or is it just something that organically happens? Because in some places where that hasn't been the situation, there's almost this need, if we're trying to start creating more of a collaborative community, to almost assign roles to people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like for example, and another example is there's some milongas, they have someone that's greeting, but it's obvious that greeting in a sincere way is not part of really their personality, and it's kind of transparent. So the organizers are doing a good job of having a greeter, but it doesn't really serve a purpose. It's like we're putting a greeter because we have to. So sometimes the assigned roles, unless they're really well fit, don't always work. And I know, some teachers too that make an effort to socialize and dance with more students in order to get more students, but that's also transparent because there's an ulterior motive there, So I think it's kind of hard to assign roles unless those roles are fulfilled by people who do those things kind of naturally, And, I've had assistants and things like that. And I always tell them, this is how I run my classes. You encourage students, you compliment them, you create that positive feedback. And still, it's just not in some people's nature to honestly do that. And I think that's hard to train or to force because it's at the bottom of it, it's a personality trait. and there are certain personalities that lend themselves better to creating interpersonal relationships or community growth. And if someone just doesn't have it in them as a person, it's hard to force that or convince them or retrain that. So, I mean, in the case of Portland, I think it happened very organically, and we're very lucky. We had the right players, not just myself, but many people contributed to the success of the community here. And also just that the word on the street is Portland equals community. So if you come in and you're a new organizer, that's one variable you should consider when doing things here. So, yeah, I don't know how you would really engineer a community. What you need is natural community leaders that can set a good example. Or festivals, having teachers that set that example. There are some teachers that circulate a lot with people, and there are other teachers that don't circulate at all. And I think if your students see you not circulating, they think that's what you're supposed to do. And if you circulate more and talk with people more, you're setting an example. So I think, leading by example, and really the leaders of a community, it's kind of, again, either in them or not, on some levels. Again, I don't know if I moved to a new place and thought, how can I start and build a community? It would be hard because I wouldn't know the other players involved and what their needs are or what their personalities are, and I would have to work with that. Or if it was just me and no one danced and I could engineer it from zero just by myself, maybe it would be different, and I would find the people that naturally like to connect with people and like that. But not everyone is like that. Some people love tango, but they don't have the social or interpersonal skills required to make a community more welcoming. Sometimes I'm out of town for my milonga, and the people that I like to have run my dance while I'm gone, whether they're hosting or DJing, are people that already have social currency. They've already built that. And I think by hiring them, what I'm saying is that, okay, the Alex brand advocates for people that are already doing this. Again, it's something that's hard to teach. I think. I mean, I give basic things. If I have door help, I say, make sure to make eye contact and greet people. And again, if they're new to the space, show them, like, the food is over there and the bathrooms are there and you can do this. And if you have any questions, let me know. To learn their name, those small gestures. The orchestra, I don't know how that plays into community, because that's almost a community in and of itself, the musicians community. Yeah, so I don't, on that front, I'm not sure. I guess other musicians, they come to me. There's some other small groups forming community orchestras, and I share all the information that I have, and I open up my studio to, if people need rehearsal space or things like that. I'm doing what I can to get it off the ground, but I can't manage those projects. They kind of have to be their own thing. I can just, again, do what I do with my orchestra and hopefully, lead by example. But yeah, I don't know. As a teacher as well, I think just the people that assist in my classes, I have different assistants. They see how I interact with people, the language that I use around teaching, and a lot of people I've partnered with or that have helped me have then gone on to become teachers in their own right. And I think that relatability is transmitted kind of through osmosis. It's not like I sit down with them and say, okay, this is how I teach, this is how I relate to people, because honestly, I don't really know. I just do what I do. But yeah, I think, yeah, just on, yeah, the people that surround me, I think see how I flow through the social space, and I think it's not something that I try to do. It's something that I enjoy doing, and that's honestly like a part of me. It comes easy to me. It's not work or effort to do, fortunately, you know. So, and I think when people see that, they maybe get a slice of that or a glimpse of that. You know, I have an event called The Thing, which is, I guess, something like a marathon tango event, and other organizers who have marathons, they come to that event, and I think maybe they get some. I like to think they get some ideas about how to create an event that's memorable and that's welcoming. Um, and that's generous. I think when I put it on, we always put out very elaborate food and make the space look beautiful. I mean, we really go all out to create memories more than to earn money. You know, money is made, but the goal is for me, when people are 90 and they're reflecting back on their life, I want them to say, you know, that event, that was really amazing. That was really memorable. And when you create memories, that's also creating community. People want to create more memories. So when you have a dance or you have an event, like, create that memory. People will want to come back naturally. They'll have a good time. They'll be happier, which means they'll dance with more people. They'll be in a better mood. You know, it kind of starts from what is your intention as an organizer. And a lot of times milongas, you come in and there's minimal effort and there's just the music and not welcoming at the door and these kind of things. Like, people don't want to be in that space. They love tango and they'll do it because of their love of tango. Um, but it can be more than just minimal effort. You know, I feel like on, you know, not, I mean, there are a lot of great events. Most of them are that, but I think, yeah, creating memories is part of building community as well.
Beautiful. So, Alex, I'm curious, you know, as you've been a long time dancer and teacher and organizer, there's a lot of work that goes into those pieces. You know, how do you keep your joy? How do you protect your social dancing joy?
I think, like, for me, when I go to a milonga now, it's to connect with people, not to connect with their technique. You know, I mean, I've danced for a couple decades, and for me to go out now and expect a mind-blowingly awesome dance every time I go out is just not realistic. I mean, it would be great if it happened, but I think every dance you have is relative to your previous experiences. And I've had great dances and I continue to have great dances, but if I expect them, then I'm going to be disappointed, you know? So I'll go out and I'll chat and I'll dance and I'll really honestly want to connect with people. And so I find my enjoyment more from that than from, you know, who's the best dancer that I can, you know, do all my steps with, or that I can have a transcendental dance experience with. I don't expect that or even search for it really. Like, I'm open to it, but I don't need to have it to have a good time. So my expectations, I kind of leave at the door. I don't have a list of people that I have to dance with. I don't have sort of a bucket list. I just go in because I like holding that space and I like to connect with people. So I think in terms of any dancer's longevity in a community, you have to assess at a certain point. You know, when you've been dancing 1 year and you dance with someone who's been dancing 10 years, it's great and you have an awesome time. And in years 2 through 5, you're in your tango honeymoon phase. It's just, you know, one good dance after another, and you have the technical ability, and there's, you know, everything is new, and you have, and then around year 7, year 10, you know, the newness is less there, and you've heard the songs thousands of times, and you've been to the festival several times, or the milongas many times, and you know everyone in the community, and you dance with everyone in the community, and it's a changing relationship with tango and with the community, and if you keep looking for the same things in year 10 as you did in year 1, you're going to be probably disappointed because you're searching for something that is no longer there in a way. And that it's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just it's a changing thing, you know. So, but I also tell people, hey, you know, if you don't love tango anymore, you can. It's okay to quit. Like, don't feel guilty for, like, you know, do it if you love doing it and you enjoy it. But I mean, you don't need to suffer, you know, to do this. I mean, find stuff that makes you happy. There are many different communities, you know. Um, so how do I maintain joy? That's one of them. When I go to Milonga, I just don't have expectations. I also feel like, I mean, I'm involved with tango on a lot of different levels. I host, I DJ, I run the orchestra, I travel to teach, I teach group classes, I teach privates, I run my practica. So at any point, if I'm doing too much of one thing and I'm getting a little bit tired of that, I can shift and do something else. Like sometimes if I'm teaching too many privates, maybe I teach fewer privates and I do some new arrangements for the band or whatever, you know. I feel like I'm diversified enough within tango that it's not just one thing. It's not just teaching and social dancing. I interact with tango on many levels, and I'm very fortunate, you know, to have that. But I also do other things too. You know, I like to play pickup basketball and snowboard and eat good food. You know, cook and hang out with my family. You know, I love playing with my boys and going on dates with my wife. So, you know, when I go to, I have less opportunities now to dance because of family than I did before. So when I do go out to dance, I always have a good time. My chances of burnout are lower because I'm not dancing 7 nights a week. I have other interests that, you know, maybe the first 8 years I had no other interests. All I did was dance 7 nights a week, and I was insatiable. And I think burnout, I've avoided burnout because I have these other beautiful distractions from tango. So that when I go to tango, I know that my time is limited and I thoroughly enjoy it, you know.
Excellent. You know, being social beings, we need lots of different aspects of that. And if we want to have enjoyable social encounters, we need to make sure that our lives have those basic needs, as you said, with Maslow's hierarchy. Um, you're doing some innovative things with music as well. Can you speak a little bit of how you're kind of, I don't know, innovating, bringing new things in, evolving the world of tango?
Yeah. So for me, with my band, it's always focusing on danceable tango. Being a dancer, I have less interest in creating sort of tango art music or tango music for listening. That's its own thing, and that's beautiful. But for me personally, my band is always focused on what is danceable and sort of what is the future of tango music. You know, 200 years from now, are we going to be dancing to the same 3 decades of music, which for myself and I think most tango dancers is beautiful and it's amazing and it's the best that ever was or will be. But on some levels, I can also see tango gravitating towards being sort of a historical dance society in a way that, you know, are we always going to be dancing to stuff recorded between, you know, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, or is there something else on the horizon? Is there some sort of new tango music that is still very tango in its feeling and its rhythm or whatever else that can kind of help to evolve the art form or to keep it a living thing rather than something that sort of struggles to survive. You know, like jazz has gone through a comparable thing. People argue, you know, is jazz dead? You know, is it a form that that is still evolving and still vibrant, or has it been studied by universities and it's kind of put on this museum shelf, and just rehashing what's already been done, or is there something on the horizon? I mean, I don't think it's dead, but it's important, I think, to embrace innovation. Not all of it is good. Some of it is very experimental and falls flat, and some of it is super interesting. But to be open to new ideas as a dancer or a musician is important. So each album that I've done has sort of tried to answer that question of what's next. So early on, I had sort of a tango jam band, Conjunto Berretin. The vibe was supposed to be fun and spontaneous and improvisatory, like I imagine tango initially was pre-1920s, this era of fun and just spontaneity. And then I started doing arrangements and looking at, well, how can I recapture the sound of the 40s, but with a modern feel to it? And then we did one album that was all original compositions. Can we do original compositions that sound like the compositions in the 40s, but that are new? And then we looked at, we did one kind of fusion or crossover album. That was the latest one of, okay, we'll add a drum kit and we'll add some elements of jazz and rock, and we won't call it formally tango, but we'll make sure that it's tango danceable, in both its feeling and its rhythms. And they're all really just experiments grown out of my own questioning of what is next on the horizon. Also, recently I opened up this new tango dance music competition. So people write a new tango song and they send me the MP3 at my event called The Thing, which is like the marathon. I'll play 12 of the entries that I've filtered, and the dancers will vote on what is the most danceable, whatever that means to them. And the winner gets $700. So there's no entry fee or application. It's just a way to financially incentivize musicians and composers to think about what is tango dance music and what can you do that's new about it. And I already have about 16 submissions, and beyond the submissions and the prize, it's kind of hopefully opening up the dialogue between the musicians and the dancers again as a complete art form, meaning not just the dance, but the music, the poetry, the visual art. Tango is all of that. And how do we get the musicians thinking about what's next, kind of stoking the fire, and as well as the dancers and the organizers, and how do we keep this art form alive? So I'm always looking for ways of sort of what's next. I'm less interested in having an orchestra that sounded exactly like a particular orchestra during the golden age. There are lots of bands that do that, and they do it super well, and it's fun to dance to, but it's not my personal interest or trajectory on the music level.
Excellent. And you said you have 16 entries. Are they from all over the world?
They are. Australia, Buenos Aires, Europe, the States. The deadline is April 6th, so people are still welcome to to submit.
Cool. Excellent. Well, this has been quite a pleasure, Alex. I want to honor our time together, and please tell people how they can find you.
The website is alextango.com. If anyone ever passes through Portland, Oregon, feel free to email me personally, portlandalex@gmail.com. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction or welcome you into the milonga or the classes. And I also travel to teach right now only within the U.S., but I travel 5 or 6 places a year doing workshops and stuff. So that's how you can find me. But alextango.com has a list of all my CDs and DVDs and apps for iPhone and Android on how to dance tango, and lots of information there about me and my studio.
Well, I can't wait to see and hear what kind of innovations come from your projects and what is next.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here, Alex.